I'm here to discuss what became a 5-year ordeal for me and my family. Originally, I started writing this as a letter to my sons to explain why Mommy is a felon. Sharing it publicly, I hope to shed light on the reality of the situation. But more importantly, I hope to prevent it from happening to others. In August of 2003, I pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit securities fraud for my work on a $300 million structured finance transaction called Project Alpha. I served 28 days in maximum security federal prison. I was on home confinement for 6 months, paid a $10,000 fine, and surrendered my CPA license. I was lucky. My teammate who fought and ultimately lost was originally sentenced to 24 years in prison. I was not an executive, director, or manager at the time of the transaction. In fact, I was the lowest man on the totem pole of a team consisting of 7 core Dynegy employees and representatives from multiple law firms and banks. I'm sharing my story because, as unbelievable as it sounds, what happened to me could happen to any one of you. But let me start from the beginning. At the age of 28, I accepted my dream job as a consultant in deal structure, part of Dynegy's accounting organization. Within weeks of joining the group, I began working on Project Alpha, which consisted of a long-term physical gas transaction and a tax-saving strategy brought to Dynegy by Arthur Andersen's tax department. Red flags started going up for me early into this transaction, but I shrugged them off and blamed them on my inexperience. The team flew to New York to close the transaction. Almost immediately, the bank began to ask for things that we had previously established were not possible from an accounting perspective. I referenced the accounting rules, but the response was, "Your friends down the street," they were referring to Enron. "Well, they're doing this, and Arthur Andersen is their auditor, so why can't you?" At the time, there was no way to know what was brewing over at Enron, but we would soon find out. For the first time in my life, I gave up on myself and stopped fighting for what I knew to be right. When the you-know-what hits the fan, we all know that anyone would naturally run for cover. What I learned after this deal that rocked my world is that people will lie and deny anything if it means saving themselves. On June 12th of 2003, 3 Dynegy employees from Project Alpha were formally charged with conspiracy to commit securities fraud, wire fraud, and mail fraud. My attorney and I drove to the FBI offices where I voluntarily surrendered. I was then fingerprinted and handcuffed before the long car ride down I-10 to the federal courthouse in downtown Houston. By surrendering, I was assured that I wouldn't be subjected to a perp walk. But as the federal agent escorted me to the courthouse, I could hear the cameras clicking. On October the 5th of 2006, I was escorted to prison. I'm not going to lie to you. I was absolutely terrified. Prison is not a nice place, and I'm here to tell you that there is no such thing as Club Fed. I was assigned my official prison number and escorted to another room by a female officer. When she shut the door, I began to cry. I knew I was about to be strip searched, and quite honestly, it put me over the edge. But she was kind. She told me that it wasn't like the movies. And in that moment, her act of kindness comforted me and gave me the strength to go on. I was then placed in a holding cell where I spent the next 4 hours because the unit was on lockdown. It's here that I reluctantly ate my first prison meal. 2 slices of white bread with a slice of turkey and green beans that were more gray than green. As unappealing as it was, I knew that I needed to eat in order to keep up my strength. Despite how difficult those 5 years were, I learned 2 very important lessons. Number 1, and I can't stress this enough, trust your gut. If I had listened to my instincts when I first began working on Project Alpha, I wouldn't have gone through what I did. I think we're often hesitant to speak up at work because we don't want to hurt the people we work with, some of whom might be our friends. Who wants to potentially get a friend in trouble? But this brings us to lesson number 2. Look out for yourself because no one else will. I know that sounds harsh, but loyalty means nothing when people start going to prison. Raising a red flag might get you labeled a whistleblower. It might even get you fired. But ask yourselves, would you rather be labeled a whistleblower and temporarily unemployed, or branded a felon for life? But mostly, I think of how my experience taught me that no matter how dark that tunnel is, there's always a light at the end of it. Does anybody know why the sentence was so long? If you work for a publicly traded company, every single one of your investors is a victim. And once that number exceeds 150, you have a multiplier that goes against your sentence. So if you started with a 5-year sentence and you've affected more than 150 people, the multiplier goes against it. We'll say it's 2. You've already gone from 5 years to 10 years. How many of you all are CPAs? How many of you want to be CPAs? Okay. All right. Maybe not after this, right? No, just kidding. One of the other factors that they look at is the complexity of the transaction and whether or not you have special knowledge. Well, if you have a professional designation next to your name, like CPA or JD or whatever, that's considered special knowledge. So you're going to have another multiplier put on your sentence. This is what happened here. So we were at 10 years, take 2 as the multiplier, we got to 20. The other factor that went into the equation here was the loss. Number 1, don't put yourselves in the position. Take care of yourself and don't think that someone else is going to back you up. The only way you're going to get backup and proof is put it in paper. And if you feel weird about putting something on paper, then you probably shouldn't be doing it.